when the day of the vote came, it was standing room only in the halls of Congress. And after 35 votes had been counted to impeach President Johnson, the question was then asked of Senator Ross, how do you vote? Later in his memoirs, Mr. Ross wrote, he said, when asked to vote, in my mind, I saw an open grave. And he said, friendship, position, fortune, everything that makes life desirable to a young, ambitious man was about to be buried in this grave by two simple words, not guilty. He was the deciding vote. President Johnson was not impeached. And Ross, of course, paid the price. His political career was ruined, and he was despised in his home state. He lost his job, he lost whatever wealth he had at that time, and the family was physically attacked. He ended up moving to the New Mexico territory simply because of the family's own safety. But he was not quiet. He was not just sitting by idly after he moved to New Mexico. He got involved in politics there, and he was actually nominated for the governorship of New Mexico. But guess what? The Republicans resisted that as well. 40 years later, shortly before he died, Congress reconsidered and voted to give him a pension. 40 years later, right before he died. But it just goes to show with distance and wisdom comes a time that they decided that this one single choice years ago probably saved the nation. So, think about that. And today, I'd like for us to consider another young man who had a very promising future in front of him. And he threw it away. By making a single choice, he also saved the nation. This young man that I'm wanting to talk about now, maybe some of you have already figured out who that person might be. Some of you are smiling, I think you do. You'll find his name both in the Old Testament and the New Testament because he is what we call one of the heroes of faith. I'm talking about Moses, the Prince of Egypt. And let's read what's written about him in the book of Hebrews, the 11th chapter, because that's the chapter that we always refer to as the heroes of faith in the Bible. And of course, Moses was one of them. And in Hebrews, the 11th chapter, verses 24 through 28, it says that by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ of greater value than all the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to another reward. That reward, of course, which would be given by God. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. By faith, he kept the Passover, sprinkling the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. It did touch all the firstborn of Egypt too, by the way. And notice some of the verbs, and I tried to emphasize those a little bit. The first verb was he refused. He chose. He regarded. He left. And he kept the Passover. The point is, God uses the person who is willing to make courageous decisions. Moses' capacity and his willingness to choose appears to be one of the reasons that God chose him. Now, it's true that Moses did resist God when he said, when he spoke to him at the burning bush, to go to Egypt and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Remember all the excuses that he had for not wanting to go, but finally, he did go. And so he is consistent with all the heroes of faith there in the that chapter of Hebrews. You got Enoch, you got Noah, and you got Joseph choosing to have his bones taken to the land of Canaan, where they would be buried. And talks about Rahab hiding the spies. Talks about Gideon choosing to go to war with a group of 300 men. Not 3,000 or 30,000, but 300 men. And over again, you see these people demonstrating their faith with courageous decision making. Now, it says in chapter 11, in verse 2 there, he said, this is what the ancients were commended for. Faith involves in the courage to make and then implement very hard choices. Ironically, we don't always typically relate to Moses on the basis of faith. We more relate to him as the man of the law. And indeed he was, but it says there that he was a man of faith. And actually, the only one in chapter 11 that gets more talked about time was Abraham. And Moses was next to him as far as the mentioning Moses and what he did and why he was such a man of faith. And that's why the Hebrews considered him to be that. And he modeled his faith by making a series of very difficult choices while he was still